Hey gang, we are on Chicago's south side today. It's a hot morning in Chicago. It's about 9:30 a.m. and it's 87 degrees with 80% humidity. So imagine what it's going to be like this afternoon. Yes, in the hundreds, but here we are. It's still a beautiful day at a beautiful place. Mount Olivet Cemetery, we've been here several times. We even did a live stream or two here. Gangsters from Chicago, murder stories, victims of accidents, you name it, they're here. And it's just a very intriguing place. We're going to be walking to the grave of what I'm going to describe as probably one of the worst, if not the worst, Chicago mobster, hitman, ringleader, and nobody really knows about him. This is somewhat of an untold story. They called him the devil, Salvatore Cardinelli. Sam Cardinelli. Yeah, they called him the devil, and a devil he was. He came from Sicily. He immigrated here, made his way to Chicago, and by call it 1914, 1915, he was already wreaking havoc. Now, he owned a pool hall here in the area we call Little Italy, called Little Italy back then, and today, the southwest side, this is where a lot of the action happened. It was a mix of factory, it was residential, saloons, stores, you name it. It was like the village center of Little Italy, and there were pool halls also, and that's what he had. He had a scummy dive pool hall, and all the people that would hang out there would be scumbags, and he started them young. There were kids as young as 14 years old coming in there and learning the trade of, well, he was an expert have you heard of the Black Hand? This was an Italian ritual that would affect a lot of people, factory owners, store owners, anybody with a lot of money. Even some of the crime leaders were victims of this or threats. It was basically you would receive a letter or a card, and it would have a black hand, and it was basically pay up so much money or else we're going to dynamite you and kill your family, etc., etc. Old Sam, the devil, he was, and that's not all he did, but that was one of his big, for 5 years he terrorized Little Italy with his gang, and they killed over 20 or 30 people. They injured over 100 people. There were newspapers. This is the prelude to Dean O'Banion and Al Capone, North Side versus the South Side. This is the prelude, and this guy was, and you look at his picture, he had this massive neck and a face that you would not want to run into. Sam Cardinelli, the devil. So let's take a walk to his grave, and I'll tell you the crescendo and what brought him down, and some really weird twists at the end. You're not even going to believe. It's one of those things where they say you can't even make this stuff up, right? Yeah. Well, there was a group of thugs, young men, and we're going to start out by just describing the choir boy, who was only 14, as I said, when he first came in there. He was really actually a choir boy, if you can believe it. It's ironic. And his name was Nicholas Viana. And by the time he was 18 years old, he was like the lead guy. All the other boys looked up to him because he was pulling off robberies. Now, the way this all worked was the devil, Salvatore, he would keep all the guns for the kids there at the pool hall hidden. And when they needed to do a job, and he'd teach them, and he would get a 2/3 cut of the action. And he'd give them the guns, and he'd give them the guns back to Sam for safekeeping in the pool hall. So it was quite an operation, not just the Black Hand stuff. We're talking about robberies and vice and shakedowns. So the choir boy was the lead kid, and his partner in crime was Frank Campione. There were two others named Thomas Errico, or Enrico, and Leonard Crapo, and they were kind of the lead thugs doing all the bad stuff. Well, one night they were all talking at the pool hall and bragging about all their little jobs and heists, and they decided it was time for a bigger job. So they went to the Godfather, their father in crime, their leader, their mentor, Sam the Devil. Sam said, yes. Well, you've got to cut me in on 2/3, but I know a saloon owner nearby that keeps a lot of money in the till. And, you know, this is a bigger job, so let's recruit some guys from the north side. So, what they did was get it all planned out, and he got the guns, and he got the guys from the north side, and they, you know, went down there. Now, the saloon owner was a guy named Andrew Bowman, probably German, and his wife Nettie. Now, they operated this right in the middle of the factory area, and they were good people. I mean, what they would do is they would cash the checks of the factory workers maybe twice a week, and then go to the bank and cash the checks in as a convenience for their customers and just for the neighborhood. So Andrew goes to the bank, he withdraws $2,000 cash, and you gotta go, wow, walking all this crime going on, he's got $2,000 cash, and he comes back to the bar, and Nettie's behind the bar, and he brings the cash in. They have $600 there in the cash register, so altogether $2,600. Now, Nettie's behind the bar, and a guy comes in, and he wants a roast beef sandwich. It's one of the, you know, there were 6 of these boys all that came in. And what's ironic and stupid, I guess, is that the boys have been in there, and a couple of them they knew them. They broke bread with the family. They knew these guys. I mean, and there were 2 guys in there. Nettie would testify later that when this one kid came in for the roast beef sandwich, she didn't really recognize him, but she recognized Errico, and I think it was the Crapo guy, sitting at a table, and they had their hats down, and when she looked at them, they were looking the other way. So it's like right off the bat, you're like setting yourself up for ID. Well, the next thing you know, other guys come running in as Andrew gets behind the bar, and Nettie's getting the roast beef sandwich from the back, and she hears gunshots, comes running out to the bar, and she sees all these men scrambling out, and those 2 guys, and there's her husband laying in a pool of blood. So, of course, you call the police. You try to help your husband. He died pretty quick. I mean, and one of the other customers was killed also in the process. He killed 2 men. And the police come within minutes, and they are, I mean, these guys, they were at a car waiting, and they were gone. But there was a guy outside who saw this all going on. I said, look at these guys piling in the car, and he testified later to the police. He said, they weren't all in the car, and the car was already taking off, and they were diving in the car. He said, oh, I got to get the license plate. He got the license plate. So they were able to start putting the case together pretty quick and backtracking. So they end up tracing the license plate back to a guy, and, you know, even in those days, they could figure it out and get the address. And his name was Santo Orlando. So they arrive at his place at 5 o'clock. I mean, within an hour or 2, they were already on scene, figuring it out. And they saw the car, and the car was parked right on the lawn. And they checked the radiator. I guess that's what you do in those days, and maybe you do that today. And it was blazing hot. So that car was running hot, but they couldn't find anybody. No one was there. Santo Orlando wasn't there. But interestingly, about a week later, his body was found, and he was in the canal. He had been shot and killed. Well, Nettie gave the two names, Thomas Enrico, and they brought this kid in, and they got him under the hot light. They, just as you can imagine, 1919, it was in June, they had him in the room, the police interrogation, and they were grinding on him, and it didn't take long for him to break down. And even under the threat of him and his family being killed, because our friend the devil, he was always very careful to say, you know, if you snitch, the birds snitch, you get killed and your family gets killed, you know, boys. Don't sing. Well, he sang. He sang a big song on everybody. And next they got the other guys in, and they got Crapo. They got the choir boy, but the choir boy, he was really scared for his mom. He had a brother, sisters, and he was threatened that, you know, the devil was going to kill his family. So this would not work out well for him in the end, because Enrico got life in prison, but the choir boy got sentenced to death. Yeah. And then, of course, after he was sentenced to death, then he just said, well, here's what happened. I was only 14 coming in there, and I was trained. This guy, Cardinelli, and everybody was pointing at Cardinelli. Now, Cardinelli, the devil, he had a lot of money. I mean, taking 2/3 of all the cuts, the Black Hand, all of those jobs, killing people. He probably had thousands and thousands of dollars. And if you check, you know, as I did the newspaper articles, they thought he was going to get away with it, you know, if you had money. By the way, Al Capone, right over there, was originally buried. This is where he was originally buried. They got him out of here. Terence Drugan. I did the story of Terence Drugan, the Fox Lake area, way northwest, the Irish gang. Boy, so many stories here, guys. But not to get distracted, back to the main story. So this is where it gets crazy. This is where it gets crazy. So, of course, it goes to trial. Cardinelli finally goes to trial, and he's convicted, and he's sentenced to death. And nobody can believe it. But he is sentenced to death. So before he is executed, the choir boy is executed. And it was a really sad scene at his cell. His mother, his brother, his little brother, and his sisters, and his mom asks him to sing her favorite song. And he sings it for her and the other inmates. They can all, the jail, they could all hear the song, the weeping song, and the kids crying. Can you imagine? And then he's led finally to the execution cell, not the execution, but he is led, and they're there again. And he's singing another song to his mom. And he says to his mom, you know, the little brother, he looks at him, he says, don't run with bad companions, and watch out, and don't do this, and don't, you know, all the things I did were bad. It's a very sad story. I mean, the kid was, he's a bad kid, but anyway, he was executed, he was hanged, and he is here at the cemetery at an unmarked grave. At another part of the cemetery, I'll show the picture for you guys where he is. But where it gets, as I was saying, where it gets crazy, I was, you know, leading up to that, is when they were going to hang the devil, Cardinelli, they went to his cell. Oh, look at, here's another baby. So many children. Probably Spanish flu. Maybe, maybe not. They went to his cell to pick him up, and he would not go. He would not go. He was just not moving. He's in the chair. So they rush him, the jailers, with ropes, and they tie him to the chair, and he's probably like, that's fine. And they pick up the chair and they take him to the gallows, chair and all. They drop him and assumably break his neck, that big neck. Chair and all. Yeah. And he is dead. But they're not going to release the body. No. They are not going to release the body. Why? This is the strange part. Now, when I was in England, I remember hearing about a story of some criminal, and this was not uncommon, where they thought you could be revived after the execution. And people would pay a lot of money. This one story I heard where the guy paid a lot of money to somebody, probably another criminal, to revive him after the hanging. Of course, the guy kept the money. He's like, yeah, I'll do it, and never did it. But so once the hanging was done and the devil was pronounced dead, what do? You give the body to the family, right? Yeah. So in this case, they were like, we're gonna, and maybe they knew something. They held the body an extra hour. Let's wait till he gets a little cold and a little stiff. And they finally give up the body to the family, and the jailer or guard that brought the body out to the family, back door, there is an ambulance, a big ambulance. And he's like, wow, that's really weird. Shouldn't it be a hearse? No, it's an ambulance. So the back door's open, and he happens to look in, and he sees a nurse, and he sees a doctor, and he sees all this stuff. It's like, what? He sees hot water bottles stretched. He sees some electronic stuff, electrodes or something. He sees the doctor with a big syringe. He's holding, like Frankenstein, a giant. And he's like, I better tell the warden. He tells the warden comes out, and they look in there, and sure enough, there's a whole setup to revive the devil. And now this is published information, but I could not find the newspaper articles, so I cannot say this is fact, but this is the story. They say, no, the ambulance ends up pulling away, and, as this is all going on, they're like, okay, we got to go. And the warden gets the police, and they send a car, and they end up intercepting, and they end up confiscating the body. And when they had opened the door, the nurse was rubbing his wrists. The devil, she was rubbing his cheeks. The shot went in his chest. What's that, adrenaline? All right, I saw that in what's that Tarantino movie? Anyway, right? They're like, no. So they took the body, and eventually the family got the body back. I'm sure he was stiff as a board then, and he's buried here. So his grave is right over there. Let's walk over there. Trying to stay in the shade, the shady spots. So yeah, and what's really freaky, and I don't know if this is corroborated, but they say that, I think it was 6 months before, or maybe a year before, the choir boy was, which is true, he was hanged. But they said that they did the same thing and they revived him. And that Cardinelli's gang, after he was revived, they were testing it out to see if it would work out the bugs, and then they killed him. Now, again, I checked newspaper reports for that, and I could not find anything. So I leave it to you if you think that's true and that happened. I don't know, but nope, that's not him, but we're almost there. I don't believe that happened. And they said there was a newspaper account, and I searched for it. I could not find it. So if anybody finds the article on Vienna, the choir boy, let me know. But here it is. This is the grave of the devil. And I can tell you this, Looks like there was a porcelain, and it is long gone. Check find a grave. A lot of times check find a grave from years ago. You'll see the porcelain. This one is a souvenir. You know that's a souvenir for someone. And I'm guessing it's not the same picture. The mugshot that we have, it was probably an interesting picture of him. It's too bad somebody took it off. Or it could have been broken off with the, you know, the stones flying. We talked about that. So, well, there it is, guys. That is the story of the Italian devil here from Mount Olivet. No resting in peace. You know where this guy was really bad. You know where he's at. All right, everybody, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.